The pandemic has changed so many things, how we work, how we socialize. What kind of changes can we expect in the future? I thought I would turn things over to my next guest, Nikolas Badminton, Chief Futurist at futurist.com. He joins us this evening. Good evening, Nikolas.
Good evening to you.
How the heck do you get to be a futurist? How does that work?
I spent about 25 years working in data and strategy and working all over the world and as a consultant. And about 10 years ago, I started running events about the future of humanity and technology. And I didn't even think of myself as a futurist. I was just someone that was curious about the world. And people just started calling me a futurist. And actually, there's an entire world out there of foresight practitioners and futurists that work with companies to help them create bolder visions and strengthen their strategic planning and anticipating risk and looking out, 10, 20, 30 plus years into the future to try and do some good planning. And it's certainly been really busy over the last couple of years.
Yeah, no kidding. We'd love to know the future for sure. But let's focus on some of the trends you've been watching, especially as we look back on the last 2 years and forward, hopefully, to just a few more months. But really, the pandemic has done so much when it comes to shifts in whether it be culture, system shifts. I want to talk about some of the key things. And one we have seen is what has happened with the retail sector globally, but let's focus even on Canada when we see how things have changed in the retail world.
So retail was never known at moving quickly. There's big infrastructure, lots to consider. Strategy had to be super well considered. The pandemic hits. The curbside pickup happened in literally days. And everything changed in terms of protocol and keeping people safe. And then, that's just like big box stores. Smaller stores had capacity limits reduced. And, it's been really disruptive. But what's happened, because we're sort of starting year 3 of the pandemic and hopefully beyond Omicron, we're going to get into some normality soon. What we've got is these new ways of doing retail. And we know a lot of us have lent on into e-commerce and having things delivered, and more of that's going to happen. In fact, a lot of stores out there that have got big box stores are going to take some of them, close their doors. They're going to become what are called dark stores, and they're just distribution hubs. So you order something on an application, it gets delivered from there. You won't be able to go in and browse the store again, and that's going to be huge business going forward. And on the flip side of that as well, there's also that trend as well with restaurants and what's called ghost kitchens. And dark restaurants would be someone like Wendy's, and Wendy's done a lot of investment in the past year or so to create lots of hubs where they make the food, and you can order through applications like Uber Eats and whatever. So they're going to have a network of dark restaurants, but there's these things called ghost kitchens, which are very large warehouse spaces that have got multiple restaurants within them. But no one can visit the restaurant and sit down. And each of the kitchens within there can possibly operate 10, 15 different virtual restaurants. And that ghost kitchens is getting really interesting. In fact, some of the analysts out there are expecting that to be a $1 trillion opportunity by 2030. It's hugely disruptive. But what's really interesting on that side of things is, it's all about growth and getting consumers. And I think that there's going to be an interesting trend where they're going to be offering food, fully prepared meals that are cheaper than the raw produce that you can buy in the supermarkets and the time you're going to take to actually make it. So there's going to be this very strange sort of tension between, let's just order in, and that suddenly becomes 3, 4, 5 nights a week versus going to supermarkets and cooking food yourself. It's super interesting from a retail perspective on, the stores and the restaurants.
And you can see how those retail or restaurants are saying, we can cut costs here, so we can pass that on, keep a very competitive market out there, keep our customer. But I wonder if you can touch on, and maybe this is too psychological, but the downside of that, because the whole act of eating out and watching other couples eat out, you're going to lose that part.
Yeah, we've kind of lost it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in Toronto and we're locked down. I can't go to a restaurant. I've probably been to 5 restaurants over the last 2 years, right? It's just, but I'm desperate to go. So I think that people are whilst there's going to be this utilitarian, let's order something and it's quick and easy and probably quite cheap, we're going to be able to go, you know what? I really value these local restaurants these small retail businesses. I'm going to give them my money. I'm going to patronize their establishments. I'm going to give them the money. And I think that there's going to be this sort of shift of sort of artisanal support out there in the world. And we've kind of seen it a little bit. But, there's all sorts of movements that are saying, we don't deal with Amazon, deal with us directly. It's better for you. It's better for us. It's better for the economy. So I do think that we're going to see that. But when you've got these big companies with hundreds of millions of dollars in their bank accounts in terms of marketing budgets, then, it's going to be guerrilla warfare on the streets a little bit from a marketing perspective. And I kind of like that tension. And I think that we as Canadians that are out there really owe it to these local businesses to support them going forward, because that's an important cultural aspect of any town or city out there in Canada.
I like that. That experience will hopefully even get better once we get out of this pandemic. Another thing I said off the top is the pandemic has changed the way we work. What are you seeing when we look down the road as far as companies continuing on this online or flex work system? What are you seeing?
You know what? We're not really going back into the office. And, even like a year and a half ago, I was sort of speculating that, we're going to get back into the office. There's going to be more protocols. It's going to be safe. People like working together. I think as this goes on and more people are forced to work from home, I think that the cultural shifts are really starting to gain pace. I think I've seen a lot of evidence that more people are going to 4-day work weeks. Some people in the UK are speculating on 3-day work weeks. But there's going to be people that are going to want to work remotely. The nomads out there. That's going to happen once we open the world. Because hey, if you're doing your job and you're doing it from your basement at home or your home office, then you can be anywhere in the world, right? And so it's really interesting. And there's this interesting trend around what's called work vacations, whereas companies are trying to bring people together, give them something fun to do. Like 3 or 4 weeks staying in a resort, people can play golf and go swimming, go hiking, whatever, and do work together. So it's kind of interesting that we're seeing this sort of disruption in the way of thinking. And I'm ostensibly talking about white-collar workers here, right? We've still got like the blue-collar, the factory workers and whatever. It's still going to be a lot of people out there, and the essential workers as well that are going to be working. And, they have to be really looked after. And ultimately, I do think whether you work in blue-collar or white-collar work, it's all about the power to the employee now versus the employer. In fact, employers are going to have to step up and earn, your patronage to work there. And, it's sort of that power shift is really interesting to me, and I'm watching that closely.
That is very cool. My guest this evening is Nikolas Badminton, Chief Futurist at futurist.com. I want to take a break here because I want to check in on some other trends that Nikolas is following, and especially when it comes to our banking. I'm Angela Kokott. We're back after this. Nikolas Badminton is a chief futurist at futurist.com. He is spending some of his time with us this evening just to talk about how the pandemic has just been such a shift for so many things. We touched on restaurants, retail, the flexible work schedule. I like the idea of companies having kind of work vacations. That's a cool one. We'll have to keep an eye on that down the road. But Nikolas, I want to talk about the overarching theme here, because so much of this has to do with technology. What are you seeing when cities start to adapt or try to attract more technology to their cities?
It's often lauded that technology is going to be like the biggest industry out there, and in many ways it's true. But I look at everything from like water, food, energy, and waste, and everything. When we look at cities, these are living, breathing cultural hubs and really important parts of life. Tech companies can come in and say, hey, we can deliver all of this value, whether it's sensors or systems and whatever. We saw this happen in Toronto a couple of years ago with Sidewalk Labs, and they couldn't quite work out a deal because, locals didn't want an element of corporate surveillance that they thought was being put onto the table, right? So there's going to be this struggle, but these tech cities are going to start to pop up outside of the large cities that there are in Canada and across North America as well. There are billionaires that are saying, okay, I want to build a city from scratch. It's all going to be tech focused. It's going to be networked. It's going to be exclusive, and it's going to be a place where everyone can live the best lives that they're ever wanting to live. And a lot of people are going to buy into these utopian dreams. But it's interesting to see that, large cities can adapt to embrace large companies. We've seen everyone from like Calgary's a booming tech hub, and Vancouver, Victoria. I live in Toronto, and then out to the East Coast as well. But we have to kind of get that balance of we welcome people that are building fantastic business, but we also need them to be part of the community and not sort of, sit in their ivory towers, right?
Well, you talked about Sidewalk Lab that didn't work out in Toronto. Are there any of these tech billionaires who are doing more than talk? Are we seeing some development when it comes to these tech cities?
Yeah, there's one city that's been launched sort of on paper and on the internet called Telosa. And Telosa is a city that, they say this is not utopian, but it's a brand new city. They don't know where it's going to be in the States. It might be in Nevada. It might be in Virginia. We're not exactly sure. But it was proposed by a billionaire that came out of e-commerce. And the billionaire is like, I'm going to front this money. People can come on board, and we're going to build this from scratch. But I think when you start to look at the companies with so much money, and we're talking the Apples, Microsofts, Amazons, all of these companies, they're going to be like, okay, sure, we're in Seattle, sure, we're in Cupertino or down in Silicon Valley, but why don't we just go out to the middle of Arizona and build our city, very much like Hershey did with Hershey, Pennsylvania, where it wanted to build a city for its workers, or Disney tried to do that as well. But these modern tech cities are going to be really interesting. In fact, I sort of speculate that Sidewalk Labs was an experiment where Google were going to come in and take over a parcel of land and say it's for Toronto, but ultimately build the ultimate Google campus, right, that no one else could really open the door to get into. So it's going to be really interesting dynamics. And states like Nevada down in the U.S. have actually passed legislation that makes it easy for these tech companies to do this kind of thing.
That is crazy. All right, let's wrap up, because I want to talk about something that was talked about a lot way before the pandemic, cryptocurrency. But there's different types of currency that I'm not saying threaten, but really have central banks rethinking the way they do banking.
Yeah, so obviously, talking about Ethereum or Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies out there, that's been big news. But they're not the ones that I'm watching. I think that they're super interesting. I think it's a bit of a cultural phenomenon. I think it's an asset class that's being pumped and dumped, and I don't think that it's as stable as it could be. But imagine if you had a multi-trillion-dollar tech company that says, you know what, we've got a closed ecosystem, and maybe that's around e-commerce and food and a number of different areas. You know what, you can choose to convert a whole bunch of Canadian dollars into our currency. And within that, if you do that, you're going to be able to buy products more cheaply. And you know what, we're going to partner with a number of different places so that you get rewards, and then potentially, when you work in the places that we own, we can pay you in those dollars that are worth more. Then suddenly you've created rival currencies to the Canadian dollar, to the US dollar. This has been speculated about for a very long time, and there's something called Gresham's law, which is like good currency is pushed out by bad currency. So you might get a tech currency, and this isn't a cryptocurrency. It might be digital in nature, but it wouldn't be necessarily a cryptocurrency in the same way. It'd be regulated by the tech company like they were a central bank. And you'd have that. If that gets to the point where it surpasses the value of the Canadian dollar or the US dollar, then you start to see challenges to the fiat currency system and the central banks from these tech players. And that is a big push, I think, that's happening behind closed doors right now. It may come to fruition with some early ideas in 2022. I mean, Facebook tried to do it with their Libra currency a couple of years ago, and it shook up the Senate down in the States enough to write letters and warn against going into this. And it's going to cause a lot of tension. But I think these central banks, there's going to be a lot of challenges, and I think that it's going to become very, very interesting times.
I don't know what group did it, but that song, The Future is So Bright, I Gotta Wear Shades. Nikolas, thanks so much for looking into the future with us.
Thank you so much. Chat to you again.
Nikolas Badminton, he's Chief Futurist at futurist.com.